With global temperatures and emissions continuing to rise, environmental experts are saying policy leaders need to focus more on adaptation rather than reaction. The latest finding reveals that we are on track for a 4 to 6 degree temperature rise by the end of this century. Scientists and experts are fearful as temperature increases near closer to our maximum limit set out by the UNFCCC, threatening serious damage to the globe. CSIRO's Dr. Canadell, involved in the Global Carbon Project, said that global emissions rose by 3% last year and 2.6% this year. He also said that by the end of the year, global emissions from fossil fuels will be at 58% more than that emitted in 1990, growing 3 times faster as time proceeds. Dr. Canadell told us that while our efforts to mitigate climate change and rising emissions are not lost, we've now reached a time where we need to focus on adaptive strategies.
We have pressed the emergency button, fundamentally. So we still can do it, but it now needs to move very aggressively and really needs to be embraced by all nations very quickly. Our numbers say that by 2020 or thereabouts, we need to turn around the wave of emissions and start declining. Global emissions, they need to start declining, after 2020. If you look at the trends that we have, increase of 3%, these past 10 years, it is very unlikely that you can actually turn this big flow of growth just in 10 years from now, down to start being negative. So at this point, we already need to start looking at adaptation. Even if we were to stay under 2 degrees, there will be enough impacts for us to really invest very seriously in adaptation. Now, it's not either or, because a world of 4 or 5 degrees, if we do absolutely nothing and we let it go and just spend all the money, economic analysts have been telling us for decades that you may be saving money now by not mitigating and adapting later on, but in the end, you end up paying much more money and the cost of the impacts of climate change much bigger to socioeconomic systems than if you now start mitigating.
So basically, we need to both do anything in our power to actually mitigate and reduce emissions while developing systems that can adapt to inevitable increases in the climate. Is that right?
That's correct, and this inevitability, has to, still to pursue to, if we can, to stay under 2 degrees, even if it's like, really embracing a complete new green industrial revolution to really get a transformation of our fossil fuel-based energy systems very quickly. And we don't want to go much higher than 2, even if we just go a little beyond. We certainly want to avoid, the current trajectory, which could be as much as 6 degrees. I think that even from an adaptation point of view, yes, Australia may have some money to do some adaptations. Many parts of the world, there wouldn't be the opportunity whatsoever. And I think that it's really important that we keep in mind that some of these higher levels of temperature will bring incredible changes in what we call the more extreme climate events. And, I think that just think for a moment the Hurricane Sandy this year in the Caribbean in New York, the Queensland floods last year, or the Black Saturday bushfires in Victoria in 2009. They're sad reminders of how ill-prepared we are to deal with these climate extremes, and this is with current climate, let alone what may happen in a much more intensified, world with higher energy, that these events will become much stronger, bigger, and intense.
Expert and policymakers are already considering adaptive strategies to climate change. As the United Nations enter their final week of the Global Climate Change Summit in Doha, Dr. Canadell tells how they are developing initiatives to help less abled countries cope with the onset of global warming.
There's a big fund that is in pursuit of billions of dollars that eventually should go to less developing countries. And a big part of the fund, goes into mitigation, but a big part of the fund really goes into adaptation of what's the least prepared and the least able to cope with these climate changes.
With climate change a virtual inevitability, Dr. Canadell told us some more of the possible adaptations we are considering to deal with these global changes.
I think that we're all collectively learning about, what's this kind of adaptation that needs to be done. I think that crop systems will change. We are studying how to do it differently. We'll need to study how to move things around. Like in Australia, for instance, we may need to shift where we put our crops. Even urban development, may need to change significantly. If we take the high warming end, we may see potentially an end of the century with as much as a meter higher sea levels. That would completely, shift, where all the urbanization exists on the coastal zone, and it would require probably, trillions of dollars of adaptation, for either moving some of the structures or protecting those structures from the higher surge.